The Port of Los Angeles says it does expect shipping volume from China to plunge about 35% next week.
Ship sailings, 17 of them, have been canceled out of a scheduled 80 or so. That shows that the drop will be precipitous and fast.
More than 30% of cargo traffic at the Port of Los Angeles has disappeared. 17 scheduled vessels were canceled in May alone, with another 10 already scrapped for June. For a country that depends heavily on imports for everything from electronics to auto parts to basic household goods, these numbers are not just abstract statistics, they are a direct hit to the everyday lives of American consumers. The empty container yards at the nation's busiest port are now signaling a much deeper economic disruption. The Port of Los Angeles, often called America's gateway to global trade, is now eerily quiet. Cargo that should be arriving to restock shelves across the country simply isn't coming. This means fewer products making it to warehouses, fewer trucks on the road, and fewer goods available for purchase. The consequences are immediate and widespread. Higher prices, fewer choices on store shelves, and fewer jobs across the supply chain, from dock workers and truck drivers to warehouse staff and retail clerks. This isn't a distant warning or a hypothetical risk. It's a present reality. The effects are already rippling through local economies and across industries. From working-class families to small businesses, Americans are starting to feel the pinch where it hurts most in their wallets and in their communities. Why aren't goods arriving at the port? Because American businesses are no longer ordering them, at least not like they used to. Behind the empty docks and declining cargo traffic lies a wave of hesitation sweeping through the import economy. That hesitation is driven not by supply shortages overseas, but by the unpredictable and increasingly costly landscape of U.S. trade policy. In an effort to ease inflation and calm industry pushback, the U.S. government recently announced a temporary reduction in tariffs on Chinese imports, lowering the average rate to around 30%. But even with that reduction, some categories remain painfully expensive to bring in. For example, auto parts still face a 57.5% tariff, while children's shoes are taxed at an eye-watering 90%. These are not minor surcharges. They are major cost barriers that reshape the economics of importing entirely. The policy includes a 90-day window during which businesses can attempt to take advantage of the temporary tariff relief. But in reality, this short time frame has created more anxiety than opportunity. Importers worry they won't be able to get their shipments approved, produced, and delivered before the window closes, and worse, that the tariffs could snap back or increase without warning. As a result, many companies have decided it's safer to pause or cancel orders altogether, rather than risk being caught mid-shipment under a punitive tax rate. What we're seeing now at the ports, the light cargo traffic, the canceled vessels, the idle cranes, is not a logistics failure, but a confidence failure. Businesses are not moving goods because they cannot plan around unpredictable tariffs. The few shipments arriving today are part of legacy orders placed months ago. Meanwhile, new orders are drying up, choking the future flow of trade before it even starts. This bottleneck is not caused by foreign suppliers or pandemic-related disruptions. It's the result of domestic uncertainty, and it's growing more severe by the week. Before starting the next part, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more breaking news. When the ships stop coming, it's not just cargo that goes missing, it's also jobs hours and stability. As activity at the Port of Los Angeles slows dramatically, the ripple effects are hitting American workers in some of the most vulnerable sectors. From dock workers to truck drivers, the real economy is feeling the pinch of a trade system under pressure. Hiring for port-related jobs has dropped by 40% according to port officials. That includes crane operators, logistics coordinators, warehouse workers, and a range of support roles tied to the flow of international goods. Truck drivers, many of whom depend on consistent shipments to earn a living, are also seeing their hours reduced with fewer containers to haul and longer waits between assignments. For gig workers and contractors in the logistics chain, this translates directly into lost income, and for some, into job loss. At the same time, businesses that rely on imported goods from retailers to manufacturers are navigating a difficult balance. On one hand, they're facing rising inventory costs, especially if they're forced to hold excess stock in uncertain times. On the other hand, they're cutting back on new imports either due to high tariffs or fear of sudden policy reversals. That means fewer goods on shelves, slower restocking cycles, and more empty space in distribution centers. For everyday Americans, the result is both higher prices and fewer choices. Whether it's electronics, apparel, tools, or household goods, the variety once taken for granted is starting to shrink while the price tags are moving in the opposite direction. In economic terms, this is a demand-side constraint caused by supply-side fear. Companies don't want to import, so they don't stock. and consumers end up paying more for less. This isn't just a logistics issue, it's a labor and consumer economy issue, one that threatens to widen inequality and fuel discontent. The slowdown at the ports is not isolated. It is radiating outward into American livelihoods, workplace stability, and day-to-day affordability. President Donald Trump has renewed his call for Apple to bring iPhone manufacturing back to the United States. But experts and industry leaders alike say this goal is almost impossible under current conditions. The idea is politically appealing: create jobs, reduce dependence on China, and revitalize American industry. But when it comes to making iPhones one of the most complex consumer products in the world, the US simply doesn't have the workforce or infrastructure to make it work. Apple CEO Tim Cook has publicly emphasized that iPhone production requires the intersection of three high-level capabilities: computer science, advanced precision engineering, and automated mass manufacturing. These skill sets are abundant and deeply integrated into China's industrial ecosystem, particularly in regions like Shenzhen and Chengdu. In contrast, the US lacks a sufficient pipeline of highly trained technicians and mid-skill specialists who can manage the kind of scale and precision required to assemble tens of millions of iPhones per quarter. The cost implications are also staggering. Even if Apple could find a way to replicate its supply chain domestically, the lack of scale and specialized labor would drive up operational costs dramatically. Analysts estimate that if iPhones were built entirely in the US, their retail price could increase by several $100s per unit. That shift wouldn't just hit Apple's margins, it would land squarely on American consumers, many of whom are already strained by inflation and higher interest rates. The challenge isn't just one of labor either. Apple's global production strategy is deeply embedded in a network of over 200 suppliers across more than 40 countries, many of which cluster in close proximity to Chinese assembly plants. Trying to replicate that efficiency on American soil would require rebuilding an entire industrial ecosystem from scratch, something that would take years, if not decades, and billions of dollars in investment. In short, while reshoring iPhone production may sound like a patriotic solution to global trade tensions, the reality is far more complicated. The US doesn't just lack factories, it lacks the skilled hands and systemic scale required to power them. Until that changes, bringing iPhone manufacturing back home will remain more of a political talking point than a practical policy path. In 2017, Foxconn, the Taiwanese electronics giant best known for assembling Apple products, made headlines with a promise to invest billions in Wisconsin and create 13,000 jobs. The announcement was hailed as a win for American manufacturing, with then-President Donald Trump personally championing the deal as a symbol of his America First agenda. The state of Wisconsin even offered nearly $3 billion in subsidies to support the project, hoping it would turn the region into a new tech hub. But fast forward to the end of 2024, and the reality looks dramatically different. After years of delays, scaled-down plans, and shifting goals, Foxconn has hired just over 1,000 workers, a fraction of what was originally promised. Much of the land remains underutilized, and the buildings that have been constructed are either under capacity or serving different purposes than originally announced. The underlying issue goes beyond broken promises. The Foxconn case reveals a fundamental misunderstanding: building a factory is not the same as building a workforce. Advanced electronics manufacturing requires a deep bench of skilled technicians, engineers, and automation specialists. These workers must be trained, retained, and supported within a broader industrial ecosystem, something the region and much of the US simply doesn't have in place. Unlike China or Southeast Asia, where entire cities are structured around manufacturing clusters, the US lacks the supply chain density and vocational training infrastructure to support such high-tech operations at scale. Without those systems, incentivizing factories to open in the US becomes a hollow gesture, one that may look impressive in press releases but struggles to translate into sustained economic development. In essence, Foxconn in Wisconsin serves as a cautionary tale. Manufacturing revival isn't just about buildings and tax breaks, it's about skills, systems, and long-term planning. Without those, even the most high-profile projects can fall flat. This story didn't start at the port. It started in policy meetings and at times in late-night tweets. The sight of empty docks, fewer trucks, and thinning store shelves is not the root problem, but rather the visible symptom of something deeper, a trade policy that's become unpredictable, short-term, and reactive. The chain reaction is clear. When tariffs shift without warning, businesses hesitate to place orders. When orders stop, shipments dry up. When shipments vanish, factories slow, store shelves shrink, and prices go up. The people who ultimately bear the brunt aren't executives or policymakers. They're workers whose hours get cut and consumers who pay more for less. In this light, the issue isn't whether the U.S. should be tough on trade, it's how that toughness is executed. A trade policy that changes direction every few months based on political mood or election cycles creates an environment where long-term investment becomes impossible. Businesses can't plan, manufacturers can't hire, and importers can't budget if the rules of the game keep shifting. To remain competitive and resilient in a global economy, the U.S. doesn't just need strength, it needs stability. Strategic clarity, policy consistency, and a long-term vision are essential for building supply chains that work not just politically but economically. Without that foundation, the next slowdown won't be a surprise. It'll be the new normal.